So, I'm making this recording about the current situation in the sky. We've just, here in the United States, we have this major flood um, energy that's happening. And we see a lot of planets in water signs, and particularly on this point of what's called Gandantha. Now, Saturn is at the edge of it. This is the place where the fire and water signs end. And it's at the point where the nakshatra of Aslesha and Magha join, and where they converge, and the nakshatras of Jyeshta and Mula also converge. This is called Gandantha in Vedic astrology because what happens is the nakshatra and the Rashi both end, where the water sign and the fire sign border each other. Both the nakshatra and the Rashi end. So in the junction between the fire and the earth sign, you have a nakshatra. Between the earth and the air sign, you have a nakshatra. And between the air and the water sign, you have a nakshatra, which holds the energy, which brings a continuity. This is in basically every ancient Vedic astrology text, and this connection between nakshatra and Rashi, which is built into the Vedic system, really is shown at these Gandantha points. And of course, anyone who has done decades of research into it generally sees the power of Gandantha, and we see it now with all of these planets in Magha in Leo, and then we have Mars also now in Aslesha. We also have Saturn at this last several degrees of Scorpio. So this is why there's been so much just so much change and kind of exploding of things around this recent eclipse, which happened with Rahu right on the Gandantha point, and whatnot. So we can also look at this astronomically, because I have this also laid out here in this really cool app that I have called Solar System Scope. And you can see this Earth transit here and this solar system. You can see how this is the same sky that we were just looking at, and in particular, one of the things I wanted to show is the retrograde of Mercury right now, which is exact the Sun. And you can see this difference between retrograde, which brings the planet close to the Earth, and combust, which has the planet far away from the Earth. So Mars is combust right now, and Mercury is retrograde. So if we look in the actual chart, we see Mars still not too far from the Sun in ecliptic longitude or in our visual field, and Mercury is exact, because you see Mercury is at the exact same degree as the Sun, but it's retrograde, meaning it's very close to the Earth, and Mars is very close to the Sun in exact degree, but it's combust. So this is the thing to understand. When the outer planets get very close to the Sun, they're on the opposite side of the Sun. They are combust all the way on the other side of the Sun from the Earth. You have the Earth here, this is Mercury, and this is Mars. Mars was exactly combust around this time, right, which was August 1st or whatever. The combustion was almost exact. Now, August 26th, we have, watch, you see Mercury move into the exact alignment here, like we have on August 26th, and this is shown in the retrograde, the exact retrograde. Jupiter's going to be exactly combust in a few months, as you see, sometime around like October 26th or so. If we go back and look, run this forward to October 26th, we'll see something around there. This is October 25th. Right, you see October 26th, Jupiter is almost exactly combust. So again, this is what combustion and retrograde look like astronomically. So this is the date that we're talking about here, August 26th, Mercury and the Sun almost exactly in this exact same degree, with Mercury retrograde and Mars combust. And so it's shown that we're experiencing a lot of upheaval as well, because again, often when Mercury crosses in front of the Sun like this in its exact retrograde position, you can see some, intense and dramatic things. And again, not like everything revolves around U.S. politics, but we had a couple big things in U.S. politics again today as well, with our president pardoning someone who was also very connected with the white supremacist race movement, a sheriff who was the sheriff of a county in Arizona who ignored federal mandates against racial profiling. This guy was convicted, and our president pardoned him today. Unprecedented kind of move. Usually you don't see pardons until there's a lot of scrutiny. So this was a real watershed event also with our president. We're going to see what happens, but this was just inciting dissent amongst those in the Latin community and other minorities, who this sheriff Joe Arpaio was not well liked. In fact, he was considered very racist and violated many federal statutes. This is why he was convicted. So again, this is very much also like Mercury retrograde, reversing something. Literally, a pardon is where you reverse something. You overturn something. You overturn a legal decision. These things are in Magha Nakshatra, in the sign of Leo. I recently talked about Magha and how we are going to be having to stick up for and defend what we think is right, which has to do with old ancestral leanings and biases and prejudices, and also sacred teachings as well, and other kinds of things. There was recently also in India the conviction of an Indian guru who was arrested, who was convicted for rape and other things. Again, you're seeing a real sort of defaming and destroying of sacred teachings, and a lot of sort of legal remedies or fighting back against it, as I mentioned even, like I said, a few days ago in the update. Particularly when we see Mars going into Magha, which is going to be starting on Sunday, the 27th. Mars is going to go into Leo, but Mars has been in this Gandantha place. They say that the Gandantha is very active for the last several degrees of the water sign and the first few degrees of the fire sign. So we're right now in that Magha, or in that Mars Gandantha point, and this eclipse happened right around that time as well. So a lot of energy. We're seeing this hurricane that's hitting the coast of Texas as I'm recording this. And again, one of the important things in astrology is to look at elements. And we see this Gandantha on this element. We see the Gandantha implications with Mars in Cancer, which is a water sign, Saturn in Scorpio, which is a water sign. And by the way, Saturn also just turned direct. Actually, it didn't really turn direct. It just stopped being retrograde. It's called stationary direct. But Saturn has been hanging out at about 27 degrees for a long time, and it's going to be at that 27 degree point for another month or so, because when Saturn stations, he kind of stops sometimes for a couple months at a time. So he stopped inching retrograde and is now stationary direct, which again also tends to really concentrate and focus energy. In many ancient Western astrology texts, the concept of stationary is very important. And you should notice when planets are stationary, because they tend to be really prominent and give their results with a lot of force. Saturn can be stationary at 1 degree or so for months. And so he's been stuck here at 27 Scorpio for quite a while. And now we're seeing some of the implications of that in this in this intense weather event. And so I wanted to show you the chart as well, because this astronomical sky is very important. People are very disconnected from astrology. They're used to just looking at grids, and they forget that they're looking at the sky. And in particular, this is a great opportunity to see the difference between retrograde and the planet being very close, and combust. You see Mercury was retrograde also at this point. You see how close it was to the Earth. And you keep going. Now it's exactly at its closest point, and it's retrograde and combust, because it's also at the same degree of the sun. But you can see when an inner planet, Mercury or Venus, when they're retrograde and combust, they're extremely powerful, because that's when they're closest to the Earth. But outer planets are never retrograde and combust. They're either one or the other. And when they're retrograde, they're closer to the Earth. And when they're combust, they're on the other side of the Earth. And sometimes the inner planets are also combust. If we keep going, you'll see there'll be a time when Mercury, like at this point, Mercury will be combust, but it's on the other side of the Earth, and it's not retrograde and combust. So now he's retrograde and combust because he's in the same line as the sun, but he's closer to the Earth, whereas around in like early October, he'll just be combust, and he'll be on the other side of the sun. That's what's called cazimi. So interesting times now, and it's a very good lesson in elements right now, because these elements are driving the weather. You'll often see this in mundane astrology, looking at a lot of planets in weather. Looking at the elements of the planets and signs and how it drives the weather. And again, we can see all of this fire signs and water signs. And again, fire and water are what make for a hurricane, because it's warm water getting swirled and then, hitting land and bringing a lot of rain and a lot of waves and whatnot, and a lot of wind. So I hope this was helpful.